Okay, I think we've got it.
All right. Well, oh, got a lot of dog things happening right now. A very, very active evening for the dog. Hello and welcome everyone to the Awareness Task Force for the City of Salem Human Rights Commission. I'm the chair of the task force, Mike Waters. I live in Ward 7 and my pronouns are they and them, and I'll pass it to Kathy.
I'm Kathy Ostrand-Ponchen. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a member of the task force and I live in South Salem, and I will pass it to Gretchen.
Hi, I'm Gretchen Bennett, staff to the Human Rights Commission, and pronouns are she and her.
So did we have any public comment, Gretchen?
We did not.
And then we do not have quorum to approve minutes unless, like in our last meeting, somebody pops in. So let's go ahead and move ahead then to the communication plan that Gretchen put together. Thank you so much, Gretchen, for putting this together and all the research that was required for this.
Mike, you're welcome. I was wondering though, if now it needs a little bit of text about at the top, like the proposal is to write a monthly piece that's offered for a variety of mediums. You know how you said once, write once, publish multiple, publish everywhere. And I wondered, like, it's at least an email, and maybe sometimes it's a social media, maybe sometimes it's a news release, and it just kind of depends. But some description of, like, I realize this lacks the communications description, and so that probably needs to be added.
Yeah, I really like that as well, because you can also kind of talk about the different channels that you have. Some of these also may, in addition to email and social media, some of them might involve the city website. Like when we're doing an event like Trans Day of Remembrance and you have a page that's done. So it might be worth noting things like that as well. There's David. This is just like our last meeting.
Mike, how would you do that? Not having written a document like that before, I think I could benefit from a little help of like how you'd structure that intro. Yeah, or the sort of the directions on this is what we're imagining doing.
Yeah, I could definitely help with that. I've written a lot of communication plans in my day. Typically what we do when we write a communication plan is we kind of start with the goals, which I think in our case, you know, if I'm articulating our goals, it's really around driving awareness of the HRC as a resource, driving awareness of the different communities that we serve. I would say those are kind of the two that come to mind. And then we go into our channels, you know, what are the communication channels we use? So those would be email, social media, city website. I don't know if there's other channels we haven't thought of or ways that, you know, things are communicated. I know, like, for example, I know sometimes in the past, we've had the mayor do a proclamation. Do we consider that to be a communication channel when the mayor does a proclamation, and should we include that in the plan? So those are some of the things that come to mind for me.
That helps me tremendously. Like, just to add goals, channels right at the top. I feel like that would help this document make sense for everybody. Good.
a lot of times when we write a plan, it includes audiences, but I would think that your audiences in this case are almost all general Salem resident, right? They're
Mhm.
mostly general audience.
I think so. And you make the good point about our different audiences in terms of the groups and individuals who've expressed interest in our work or who serve people or work with people of the various identities. That's one of the audiences that's a little more specific than the general population. But
So sometimes we would detail that out. I mean, again, from my lens, from doing it corporately, it might be a little different, but like we would take every stakeholder group that is, because we might have different channels that point to those audiences. So for example, your email that you send out, that is really to your like stakeholders, I guess you might call it, your engaged audience. Whereas social media is going to be like your general audience. So maybe you would just, when you mention the channels, maybe you would just say that, what audience it was aimed at. That sometimes
Perfect.
helps people get their grasp what's in the plan.
good, I like that. Thank you.
Do you think on some of these where you have like 4 or 5, or there's one where there might even be 6, I guess 5 is the most that you have. Are you imagining it where the email topic might be, I could see a world where you would have an email that would be sort of like, here's what's going on this month in the world of human rights, and it would be general and it would have blurbs about each of them. But then I could see where you would take each of those observances and have a single social media post for each. Is that kind of what you were thinking, or?
It is. And I was thinking that strikes me as a regular point of conversation, and probably the factors might include what the commission members are seeing as important to highlight that month, and the capacity maybe of the communications team in any given month, given what else is, in the queue. And so it occurred to me that might be a little bit dynamic from year to year.
Yeah. So the idea of this plan is just to lay out in broad strokes what you could communicate about or write about, but you will have things that will come up through the year that might supersede what you've planned. So for example, if we were going to do a discrimination survey in a particular month, you might want to reserve your email communication for that discrimination survey, but still have the other recognitions happen on social media or somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I like that approach.
That might be a part of the end of the preamble. I've been noting, like, we could talk about the goals, the channels with reference to audiences, and maybe it would end like with, here are some ideas we could include, but this is iterative and dynamic and based on, kind of the current experience and capacity, things like that.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay.
Well, I've done a fair amount of talking, David and Kathy. What thoughts do you have? Kathy, I think you're on mute.
I muted myself because my dog was making sounds. I think what you've been talking about so far sounds good. I like it. I don't think I have anything at this point to add.
And I came in the middle of the conversation, so I'm not even sure what we're talking about.
We're talking about the communication plan document that Gretchen sent out, which has the months and the topics.
Okay.
And we were kind of talking about fleshing out the preamble to that plan so that people would understand how these months and topics translate into communications that go out.
I see.
And it does look like you have a good mix in there, Gretchen, of communities.
Mhm.
I can't think of any that are missing. But probably once you get this plan in front of the full HRC, you might get some more ideas.
Mike, good question. I know your time on the HRC is ending, but for this task force to ask you, should that be an attachment at the January HRC meeting? It probably should as a reference point.
Yeah, it seems like a good thing to include in January, as well as might give everybody something to think about as you're developing your work plan as well,
Mhm.
because you wouldn't want your work plan to you just want your work plan to have things come out in good time.
Yes.
And this can give you some ideas, like for example, how we talked about in the last meeting, launching safe spaces in June, which is Pride Month. I think the other elements of your work plan could line up with some cool dates as well if everybody had this as a reference. So I think it's a really good reference. I want to pin it up in my office so I remember all of these.
Good.
Any other thoughts on the communication plan? Stepping back an agenda item, since David is here, I wondered if we could look at the minutes. Since we have quorum for the minutes.
So I'll move to approve the December 2nd, 2021 minutes.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, none opposed. Thank you. Then moving on, unsheltered communities. We talked about this at some length last time, and we talked about maybe not doing an outreach until we see what happens with our Chapter 97 recommendation. But we said we would keep this as a standing agenda item. So I think that's why it's on our agenda tonight. Do we have anything new in that regard?
I don't. I do think we have some good nuggets of ideas, like writing up something in a small card that can be handed out, having information on webpage, distributing information through all of the nonprofit organizations and advocates. And we have methods for communicating through those folks. But I know that I think what I'm hearing is there would be a pairing of the Chapter 97 update, if we have it, combined with the resource of the Human Rights Commission, that we wanted to not just do that sort of generic, we are the Human Rights Commission and we're here to help without that change of the Chapter 97. So, but I think we've got some ideas that we're kind of holding for the moment.
That approach sounds right to me, because we heard from them in the survey that another resource isn't what they're looking for. They have resources that they've been told about before. But I feel like if we can communicate with them about a change that has been made in the city of Salem, and that community has now been recognized as one that has been discriminated against and deserves support around that, then I think that that's a different message, and I think it might be a little bit better received.
There's a second piece to it as well, that some sort of an education campaign to the community at large about, please don't treat these people poorly because of how you perceive them.
That's right.
But I think a piece of that might be what city council does about Chapter 97, but even if they don't, or it goes a different direction than what we've recommended, or if it just gets delayed, I still think that's an important piece to get out there somehow. I don't know the best way to go about that, but
connecting dots here, is there any kind of day of the year or recognition that happens of unsheltered people that should be part of our annual communication plan? Is there any sort of moment in time? And there probably isn't, to be honest. But maybe making
in January
sure
they
that
do a point in time count. Yeah, sorry.
Wait, say it again.
Sorry, Mike.
Kathy?
Sorry,
No,
I
go
didn't
ahead.
interrupt you. And the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is in January, they do the annual point in time count. It's in January, which is next month, but that's the only thing I can think of that happens on a regular basis.
I just Googled, and Google says November is National Homeless Awareness Month.
Really?
Cool.
Yeah.
November?
Correct.
Thank you.
I think those are both two really good opportunities to communicate. The point in time count, I don't know, for January of 2022, it might be a bit premature for us to communicate because we haven't seen what's going to happen with Chapter 97. But maybe by November of next year, by Homeless Awareness Month, you would, and you could see a really good information campaign coming out of that around, here in Salem, we don't discriminate, hopefully, if our recommendations go through for Chapter 97. Hopefully we'll be able to say here in Salem, we don't discriminate on the basis of housing status. It's written into our city code. I mean, that would be so powerful to be able to share during a recognition month like that. I really like that.
Also, November 12th through November 20th is Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week.
Thank you.
There's a lot of things online about it.
Okay,
Awesome.
great. I'll add that to the timeline and then we can have those dates to build in to look towards. I know one of the local nonprofits is working on a second edition of a booklet they published, which includes professionally and beautifully done photographs of people in Salem who are unsheltered, combined with short vignettes about the situation, the narrative, the experience that shares kind of real people, real situations. And I know the first booklet was seen as a real helpful educational piece, and they're excited about the second one that they're producing. So that could be something at some point that becomes a resource for us.
I have a question. Do they still wrap the police cars with different awareness thing?
David, I haven't seen that done in a little while. Great question about do they still? Certainly in the past they did, but I haven't seen it in a while. That'd be easy enough to find out. That's another channel,
Yeah.
potentially. Yeah. I'll ask. Good question. There's probably a price tag to that. But it's potentially pretty visible.
Well, did we have any other thoughts on unsheltered? I think some really good ideas tonight, but we do have a little more work to do on other things before we're ready to communicate.
Gretchen, I think did you say that was going to be raised at the council's upcoming January meeting?
That's correct. Counselor Virginia Stapleton reached out right away and initiated a process to make a motion at the January 10th meeting about the recommendations. So it's slated right now to be on the agenda at the January 10th City Council meeting. And then, of course, it'll be up to council vote. But that would be the evening where they could deliberate and vote.
How many meetings does it typically take? Like this would be the initial, right?
Actually, I'm 99% sure I'm correct in saying something like this can just be one meeting. It's a 2-meeting process if you have a proposed change to the code. And so to me, what our recommendation is to study, it directs staff to come back with the changes to the code. So I think you can do that in one meeting. And then when the attorney comes back and says, okay, here would be the edits to the code, that would take 2 meetings to actually vote on. But they can direct him in a single meeting to do that work.
And then is that a few month process when they get a recommendation like that? How long does it typically take?
I'd want to ask Dan. I'm not sure of the answer to that, but I'd be happy to ask.
I'm just thinking by the time of our next full commission and task force meeting, if we still have it in January, we'll have heard what the council's initial conversation was around this.
Yep. Speaking of communications and awareness, that's also an opportunity. People can sign up for public comment to speak at the council meetings, and 3 minutes are afforded any speaker. So that's another potential method of communications. Right now, we have limited slots for public comment, and we're on Zoom. People can sign up on the day of the meeting for those slots.
Other thoughts around unsheltered and the work that's coming up? Well, our next agenda item is the task force itself. I think that the chairs of Human Rights Commission will be entertaining what task forces shall continue into the new year. I think at the last full commission meeting, Angela may have asked what my thoughts were on awareness and whether it needs to continue to be a formal task force. And I'm not convinced that it necessarily does, because some of the work could be folded into the broader commission. However, if the commission decides to do another survey, I really think you need separate meetings for that, because it's such a big undertaking that requires, a fair amount of discussion. As you saw, we had community interest this year. We met with Marianne a couple of times. We met with the students a couple of times, and that's a body of work that's probably too big for the full commission meetings where you're having other agenda items that are going on. So that was kind of what I thought from my lens. And I don't know, Gretchen, exactly what you wanted us to discuss about it tonight, but I won't be on the task force going forward. I'm going to stay on LGBTQIA, but I'm going to step off of the commission, obviously, in this task force. So maybe the discussion is just, you as members, what do you think about the coming year, and whether you might want to continue, how you might want to continue this work?
Mike, I agree. And just to add real quick to what you said, I think that's what I was imagining might be helpful for you as you move into you, David and Kathy, as you move into the January work plan work with the Human Rights Commission. And while you have Mike at the table on this topic, like, for example, would you think this group would reduce to a quarterly meeting where you lay out the next 3 months of communications objectives based upon that communications plan, and then meet more frequently if and when a student survey is conducted? Or would you recommend sunsetting the task force and utilizing the full Human Rights Commission for the selection of the communications priorities as a regular agenda item at the commission? And then if you do a student survey, springing up a task force that's focused on that student survey? Or would you leave it alone? Would you say we like the monthly meetings and feel that's really important for dialing in our communications, and so we'll just need to identify a new chairperson? So I wasn't sure, but I could see all of those pathways and thought you might like a bit of time while Mike's at the table to sort of explore it as you move into, because in the commission meetings in the future, everybody will be thinking about, just as Mike said, what to keep, what to change,
Right.
what kind of resource and capacity you all have as commissioners to staff things and participate in things.
I feel like the item around the unsheltered communities is important to keep active, and I'm not sure there's time to really address it as it needs to be addressed in the full commission meeting, I guess is my thinking. Everything else you've said I agree with, but that's the one where we've kind of started this process, and I feel like I don't want to let that get pushed off to the side.
And Gretchen,
Yeah.
I don't know what my future is. I don't know if this is my last month.
Oh, David,
This is my last month, but I said I would re-up, but I haven't got notified if I am re-up. So
my
I might-
apologies. No, you're being re-upped. You were re-upped, and I apologize that we didn't get that notification to you. Welcome to another term on the Human Rights Commission, David. They were delighted to have you serve another time.
okay.
Sorry.
Good to know.
Whew. Good. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I think
I'm
that
sorry,
makes a lot of sense, Kathy, what you're saying about continuing down the road of unsheltered. And, one thing you could consider is having sort of an offbeat cadence to your meetings. I mean, maybe they're not monthly, they're not quarterly, but maybe they're scheduled as the topic comes up in HRC, or as you have something to do. Or you could do a monthly and check in on that communication plan because you have a plan. at least the start of a plan that you could check in. So I could see it going a lot of different ways with it. Did we just lose Kathy?
We did, but she's back in the waiting room very
Okay.
quickly.
Woo.
Or you could reduce meetings scheduled to half hour instead of an hour, for example, if you feel like that would meet, stay with monthly, but go to half an hour. It's another approach.
Yeah. Yeah, you could definitely do that.
Was awareness, awareness task force have more on its plate with pre-COVID?
Yes, don't you think so, Mike? Because there was also all of the in-person event activities that were underway. Early on, the group developed the tabling materials, identified locations to
Yeah,
table.
That's true.
Mhm.
That's true. But then even with that feels like it's more or less plug and play at this point.
Mhm.
The tabling materials are done. Now, should they be looked at every once in a while and fixed up and cleaned up? Yeah, probably. I mean, so there's definitely, it sounds like a need for ongoing task force work, because if you do a survey, you need the task force. If you update your brochure, you need the task force. If you decide to make a change to your tabling strategy, you might need the task force. So there are definitely places where, I could see the ongoing nature of it. But it does seem like we also have done some work that could allow it to be a little shorter, where you're just checking in between things, rather than needing to invent, because we have created a lot of, and when I say we, I really mean we, like Rita, before I got on the commission, really did it all. But anyway, yeah, I think there are structures in place that might allow you to have shorter meetings, I guess is what I'm saying.
Wasn't there another task force that, I kind of remember when I first joined HRC, there was another task force and that was combined into this task force? I don't remember what the other task force was called.
Oh, David, thank you. Yes.
So I wasn't sure if there's another responsibility we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, thank you. David, you're helping me remember some of our early documents. I believe that we used to have a separate committee or task force that was called the Core Response Team.
Yes.
No, whoa, we did. But then there was another, forgive me. You know what David might be thinking of though, is there was also, what was it called? You might make the argument that you've completed the task, but it would depend on how you look at it. We used to have something that the name is the Liaison Program. The Liaison Program. Do you remember that document? And it described the role of a commissioner in being a liaison to different groups and organizations and identity communities. And it laid out ideas for how that would work. Like a commissioner could attend regular meetings, develop relationships within the community, find a way to more closely connect, recognizing that issues around hate and bias and discrimination are really sometimes very personal and you need a relationship. That for a while was a standalone thing and then got moved into awareness. And then I think that what the awareness committee did was identify people and emails that could be on our email group and move into a broader, more wholesale communication approach. So that liaison program could be reviewed and rekindled if you wanted to go in that direction again. That's a really good point, David.
I think that's a really good point too, because the reason that we went to this more holistic communication approach was probably driven a lot by COVID, because we couldn't have liaisons going to I mean, there aren't in-person meetings of things. You could send a liaison maybe to the virtual, I don't know, NAACP meeting or something, but they're not probably going to get the chance to interact. They're not probably going to be able to bring in very much back that's new or very different. So anyway, yeah, I think you're right, David. Like, we took in the liaison program, but because of COVID, we haven't really done anything with the liaison program. So that would be definitely an activity that the awareness task force could continue doing and really strengthen, because we just really didn't do anything with it other than setting up our email blasts.
Vice Chair Gallagher at the last commission meeting, I think, was just speaking to some of the desire to connect more directly with people and communities in the coming year. So it almost reminds me of the objectives of that liaison program coming back.
That's a really good call out, David.
And just from past experience, it does look like that takes nurturing. We tried a couple of times to sort of make suggestions, and commissioners could sign up and go forth and liaison. And it seems to benefit if there's more helping people through the questions, troubleshooting what barriers they might have to getting it done. Like, it doesn't seem to launch sort of organically or naturally on its own in most cases. And maybe it's different from year to year and group to group. But there might be a role in coaching and consulting with commissioners who agree to be liaisons.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Gretchen. I don't think that we had any kind of materials for it, for what, when you sign up to be a liaison, what does that mean? And what do you take with you to the meeting? Do you literally have talking points or something to take with you when you're out meeting with community members? Also, it's a challenge. And one of the reasons why I favored doing an email blast like we do is that it's level. It goes to everybody equally. Even if it's not as impactful as the liaison program, we know that every community at least got the email or had the opportunity to open it. The hard part with the liaison program is you're relying on the people liaising, and you're going to have variation in how much and how seriously people might take that role, unless you can really build a good structure for it. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth exploring building that program. I'm really glad you raised that. So it sounds like from the discussion that there's probably some value in an ongoing awareness task force. Like, you all should probably advocate for that at the next HRC meeting. I will miss you.
Well, Mike, I know you'll be missed too. I'm, as our staff, I'm super grateful for your leadership and facilitation and your guidance and your expertise related to communications. It's been super helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely miss you on the task force, but I'm glad that we'll still see you. Some of us will still see you on the LGBTQIA+ task force. Yeah,
for sure. Any other thoughts we want to have tonight around the next steps for the task force? Well, we have member remarks and announcements. I would just say this has been really enjoyable working on this task force, and especially working on the student survey is probably my favorite work that came out of HRC while I was on it. 3 different surveys. Is that right? Did we
Yeah.
do 3 while I was on the commission? So really, really great to be a part of that, and just to be elevating the voices of our community. So I'm just really appreciative of the opportunity to chair and to get to see you all once a month. And I am sure I will see you on other things as time goes on. So anyway, thank you very much. Any other member remarks or announcements?
Thank you again, Mike, for all that you've done and for your expertise.
Sure thing.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. I still want to take you up on your trip about tour of safe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If we ever open again, I shouldn't be saying this on a public meeting. We'll talk. We'll talk. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.